Discovery.
3, 2, 1, 0, 0. Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Welcome to the Podcast Discovery Show, the podcast that's about other podcasts, where every single week we have a book club style discussion about a podcast. And at the end of the episode, we're going to have a brand new show to listen to, and we'll talk about that one next week. I'm Kirk.
I'm Zach.
And I'm Matt.
And this week we are talking about a titan of a podcast called Stuff You Should Know, brought to you by the guys who have the website How Stuff Works. They break down topics each episode to make it very accessible and easy to learn about. And it's just stuff that they think you should know. And because we're right at the end of Spooky Month, and I tried to find something scary and failed, I picked something that I thought was interesting instead, and it is how vampires work. And even though this is an old episode, as I was researching for this, it's basically the same information you can get on any website that's putting out, oh, here's the history behind vampires. It's pretty much the same.
At a glance, I saw that you had this up at work, and I thought it said how vaginas work.
That's a different episode. I wonder, they might have it. You know, they might just like lean in and be like, you know what? It's time for the people to learn. People need to know.
The words are about the same length long. And,
I was once wearing.
Start with a V.
I had a Virginia's for Lovers hat. And my buddy once was like, "Vaginas for losers."
Honestly, also
so funny.
Also a funny hat.
I want to make that hat,
meaner
with the shape of Virginia on it.
Yeah,
so that the joke.
So they
is
think
there.
You typoed it.
Yes.
Oh God,
that's pretty great. I derail this, but what were we
anyway?
talking
Vampires, huh?
Vampires, right? Yeah, it's spooky. But yeah, this episode they kind of get into the thing that drew me to it was just how they really steep the mythology in the culture. They take you back because vampires, as we learned in this episode, are thousands of years old. They've been in a wide variety of cultures from all over the planet, and it was almost always based off culture. And that's like kind of what evolved this into a full-blown thing to where we are now, where it's gotten ridiculous. It's completely like lost any scariness, I say. But I thought it was an interesting thing to kind of an angle to look at something like a vampire. What'd you guys think?
So I learned a lot. I had listened to shows that had talked about vampires before, like lore and stuff like that. But I actually ended up learning even more stuff on this episode. So kudos on that end. And also, of course, it's well made. These guys are likable. It was very enjoyable to listen to.
Yeah, I pretty much exactly how I feel about it. I also thought it was really fascinating. I told you this before, but the bleed between vampire history and sort of this zombification history, like once it hit like the Dark Ages, it feels like it really like started crossing over a little bit.
I think my favorite crossover, because yeah, they really do dig into all of the lore behind this. So there's, I need to pull up our notes so we have some of these, because I remember lemon stew's on there somewhere. That's the only one I remember so far.
How did they pronounce it? Because now that you said lemon stew, that's all I can read.
I think it was like lemon stew.
Lemon stew, right?
Yeah, but this just says lemon stew, and stew is spelled STU. But yeah, so there was a demon in Mesopotamia. There was lemon stew and Lilith. There was all of these different ancient creatures. And yeah, they did start bigger. You know, when it was the ancient civilizations, they're like demons that would eat your babies. But then they kind of took that back to, it was people trying to rationalize just sudden infant death or child mortality at a time where there was no medicine, and people were afraid.
So many
and hurting.
Stories of vampires killing kids, and most likely and historically, it was during like an epidemic of children's dying, and the people finding something to hold on to or grasp onto as a culprit for this invisible disease, because they didn't know anything about disease at the time. But
medicine at that time was bleeding you. They're like, well, if we let some of the red out, then you'll make new ones and you're going to feel great.
Yeah, I also thought it was interesting. The miscarriage was like a symptom of vampirism.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was fascinating.
And I think that's the thing because really when you think about it was 10 plus, it's probably way more than that, but we're talking all over the world. They had something similar. And then as we started kind of mixing together, these things started to evolve even more. But there was a lot of stuff where like they would take pieces from others because like the miscarriage stuff, it seems like there was a lot of that with children dying that became like vampire. And they had some weird ones where like if you had birth defects, they're like vampire. But at least I can't remember which country that was, but at least they were nicer about it. They're like, okay, we'll cut you a break. We're just going to burn you when you die. We won't hurt you right now, but we don't trust you. And what did they say?
I had just told my daughter that we were listening to an episode of Spooked. And they talked about witches. And I talked about, the Salem witch trials and stuff with her. And it blew her mind because I was like, yeah, they used to like throw witches in the water, with a weight on them. And if they sunk, then they were human. And if they floated, they were a witch.
I saw in the documentary Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Exactly. But yeah, the fact that these people were attributing, sicknesses or diseases to a monster, essentially, and they were digging up old relatives that they assumed were vampires, and that's the reason this happened, and they were burning them or cutting their heads off, or they said that at one point they were putting like stakes in coffins pointing down so that if you turn into a vampire, you wouldn't be able to get out.
No, and I think they did a similar thing in Norse culture because they had like draugrs, you fight them in Skyrim. Yeah. It was a real thing in the mythology and they would take them in backwards so they would get confused and not know how to get out. I was like, I mean, you think the thing's coming back to life, but you think it's too dumb to figure out there's one hole out of here, but they would do it. They had all these things. And I think there was a lot of pairing between just like undead, so like zombies and stuff, and then vampires, because it seems like our whole perception of them is just movies.
Right.
And so they probably pick and chose, movies / media, because they talk a lot about Bram Stoker's Dracula. They talk a lot about Twilight because it was 2012 when this episode was released. And so basically has formed how we view these things. But I think they're all way more intermingled throughout like lore. Yeah.
Well, I thought it was really interesting that they talked about Bram Stoker being the really first time vampires. Abraham. Yeah, that's right. That was actually really interesting too.
I had no idea.
I did not know that.
No idea that was a shortened name.
But when they were like, yeah, vampires were kind of stupid and like not what they were and not what we know of them today before he wrote about them as these suave kind of sexual creature things.
I do think that's my favorite turn from like just undead like idiot, because they had one where they were like OCD idiots and you could like sprinkle seeds on the ground.
Yeah, and I did not know that.
No,
that's good.
I like the turn to I'm going to make a sexy undead beast, and it's just going to trick people into loving it because they're so sexy. Because that became the whole thing. There was just sexual tension in everything. Because like that was True Blood, that was Twilight, that was Interview with a Vampire. That became the whole thing. Was just this kind of like, I don't know, almost like sexual manipulation was kind of part of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was in Dracula too.
They really were just like demons, like creature beasts things.
Yeah, they were undead. They were basically what I would equate with our zombies. Like Matt was saying, there was a lot more crossover with zombies than I knew ahead of time or before this.
It did just keep blowing my mind when they were talking about these different epidemics, because they talked about porphyria. They talked about, because imagine tuberculosis. Tuberculosis, you're literally coughing all the time, coughing up blood. You turn extremely white and like very pale and weak and lose weight and are sweating constantly. And then each person in your family starts to die of it. If you don't have any clue what medicine is, you're like, something's happening here. The first one who got it was a vampire and he gave it to everybody else. And in a sense, there is some like kind of element of like, oh, okay, kind of, it was a disease. So it was just spread. You could have prevented it, but one person did get sick. and ended up killing everyone in the family. So it's just,
So
I don't know, it's just crazy. It was
There's
crazy
a lot
to view
of
it through that lens.
stuff around tuberculosis too, like kind of like really a lot of lore and things like that. Because, like you said, that's a disease that's very, very weird. And there was weird stuff with that too, with the way they buried people and stuff like that. Because the same thing.
Why did they call it the consumption? Anybody?
I don't know.
Oh, I think it's because it consumes you. You know what I mean?
that's
Not
what I
like the
would
other way
assume,
around.
yeah.
Not like you're consuming too much, like it consumes you. Like slowly you like die. I think I remember
'cause
that
it
now.
just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. But yeah, so there was a ton of really interesting kind of like backstory on how all of this kind of formed throughout the years, because we're talking about thousands and thousands of years. But something I wanted to talk to you guys about is, what is your favorite vampire movie?
Favorite vampire movie?
I know right off the bat.
Me too.
Let
Mine,
the
it's
right
no
one in.
doubter.
Let the right one in.
The original or the
Yeah.
American? Okay.
No, because I think the American one's called Let Me In.
Oh, did they really change the name?
I believe they did. Yeah.
Lame.
Never watched that.
I know
Very
it doesn't
good.
really count, but What We Do in the Shadows is probably mine. Technically, they are vampires. It is not a traditional vampire movie. It's very stupid.
But it covers like every single type of vampire.
Yeah.
You know?
There's one that looks like Nosferatu that's really mean. They're
There's
all scared
the
of
sexy
him.
one. There's the Dark Age Dracula one, and then there's like modern ones. Yeah, it's
It
got 'em all.
honestly, if anybody hasn't seen What We Do in the Shadows, go watch it. Also, the TV show is pretty
Oh my
solid
God.
too.
Taika Waititi is amazing.
Yes, he is.
I'm a sucker for Kate Beckinsale, so whatever one that was that Kate Beckinsale was in, I don't even remember which
is
one
that
it
one?
was.
I know what you're talking about.
It wasn't
Underworld.
Van Helsing. It was
It's Underworld.
Underworld.
Yeah.
Yes.
She might have
That
been
was
Van
it.
Helsing too, honestly.
I think she actually was.
She made an entire career out of vampire movies.
Just vampire movies.
What is your favorite one? Is obviously Underworld 2 or 3, Rise of the Lycans, right?
Of course.
Wait, how many did they do?
They've
I
made
think
a
it
lot
was
of them.
3. I think there was 3. Maybe more? I don't know.
Yeah, I think there might be 3 actually.
I stopped.
mind.
I gave up long before I got to episode 3 being dropped.
Gotcha. Well, fine. Well, what do
I don't
you like
blame you.
about the vampire depiction in What We Do in the Shadows?
The hilariousness of it,
Oh, of course.
just in general. No, it's
Well, okay.
it's a very funny movie, and I don't know. I did like that they kind of like bring in all the tropes at once and
Yeah.
put them in a house, and then they give them like stupid real roommate problems. I don't know. It's a really funny concept for a movie.
What is that movie about?
Oh, if you haven't seen it, I'm not telling you. You need to just watch it. It's
Okay.
really funny.
It's
You're not gonna
very amazing.
gonna regret it.
Well,
I have not watched
I
that
guess I will also say Dracula Dead and Loving It is a great one as well.
I don't know if I've seen that
Oh
one.
my gosh, it's Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks directed it. Leslie Nielsen plays Dracula.
Oh my God. Okay, yeah, I really
Amazing.
want to watch that.
And of course, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. So good.
I forgot they did that for a minute, where they were
It's
doing
on
this
HBO
weird.
Max.
Is it?
Yeah.
No,
It's on
I
my
do.
list.
Okay. This is a verbal trademark. Nobody steal my idea. But my roommate's son is 4 years old. And I can't remember what we were talking about, but he just said a word that immediately prompted a movie idea. And the word was vampirates, where it's both. You can definitely make something happen out of that. And Kirk's
Oh, yeah.
got to love it. I'm going to hire Kate Beckinsale.
Oh,
That's
you got
done.
me. I'm done. It's my favorite movie now.
That's my favorite one. There was also, they briefly talked about it on this podcast, actually, and I've never heard anybody talk about it. The one with Willem Dafoe and John Malkovich that I think
That's the one they talked about. I want to see. Where he's playing Max Schreck, right? Like he's like playing like, okay, yeah, I'm going to just watch it. I'm not going to look anything up. Is it good?
Interesting. It's interesting.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Willem Dafoe is amazing.
I love Willem Dafoe.
Oh,
He's so good. Kirk saw The Lighthouse and he didn't know how to feel about it.
I felt a lot of things. I didn't know what any of the feelings were, but I felt them.
And you felt the right thing.
Yeah, maybe you were. Hey, it happens to the best of us. Maybe you were attracted to that mermaid statue.
I wasn't, but Kate Beckinsale, but not the mermaid statue. But everyone else was in that movie.
Yes, they were. Yes, they were.
That was the best of us.
We're wildly off track right now. But yeah, in general, Stuff You Should Know is a great, great show. We hope that everybody has had a fantastic spooky month full of moderately scary podcasts and us talking about somewhat spooky season related topics.
You realize we went in a complete circle. We ended up at Lighthouse because vampire from Twilight guy's in that movie.
I know. And Willem Dafoe. Full circle.
Full circle.
Robert Pattinson plus Willem Dafoe.
That's why I didn't understand the movie. They were vampires the whole freaking time.
It's the Lighthouse extended universe.
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he actually did that.
Makes sense.
He would do that. That guy would do that to you.
No, I'm kidding. That movie still makes zero sense.
Can I tell you, one of the funniest things is you guys have seen Twilight, yes?
Yes, I have seen all of them.
I saw the first one.
I saw all
the
of them.
baseball scene. The baseball scene. What in the world? Vampires have to play baseball in thunderstorms because they hit the ball so hard it sounds like thunder. I think I left the room after that. I was like,
I don't remember that, but wow, that's especially stupid.
Yeah, and I remember it because Muse did the soundtrack for that, and it was Supermassive Black Hole. Yeah, played.
That's
during
actually a pretty good song. That's wild.
It is, but I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen or heard of. Just walked.
That movie didn't hold up the first time I saw it.
It didn't hold up as I saw it in theaters.
Yeah.
It was 10 years behind.
It definitely hasn't held up, in my opinion, at all. Because I've seen it on TV and stuff, and it looks just...
But it brought Robert Pattinson. The guy is a beast now. He's really great.
Hey,
no, he's a good actor.
Kristen Stewart. Excuse me. She does good stuff? Okay.
I don't know if I've seen anything she's done recently. I was trying to think if I've seen anything she's done.
Like,
she always plays the same role where she's just like
she played that.
She's playing Princess Diana at some point soon, right?
Yeah, she's Princess Diana. Yeah, her early movies, I think she was the same person, but once she was like,
she was always that broody, like no personality girl.
Like, leave me alone.
That's what her role was.
Yeah. Charlie's Angels. She's in the new one. I don't know how that was, but
I was about to say, did you see the new Charlie's Angels?
I didn't know they made a new one.
They have to make one every 5 years. It's part of the contract they have signed with someone.
The devil.
It's Charlie.
Maybe Charlie, maybe the devil. They could be the same.
Hey. Good Lord.
So one other thing I thought about when they were talking about, people basically making up excuses for vampires. And I learned that from lore was werewolves was the same thing, where like there was a guy that was murdering people, and literally while he was about to get hanged for his crimes, he was trying to get out of it, and he was saying that he was turning into a wolf and doing these things. And that's how it all started. Like that's like, but it's the same thing where you try to like blame something on something else. And
wait, did they still hang him?
Yeah, no, he got
that did not work.
Yeah, they're like, well, if you're turning into a wolf, then we're definitely going to hang you.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, you made our decision really easy, pal.
Yeah,
like you were like wear a belt, and like that belt would make him turn into a wolf. It was really weird. But the same thing where these people were going through something and they wanted to find a kind of an escape, something to pin it on, a scapegoat, something that they could accuse of doing these bad things. And that's why I think it's fascinating to look at lore and folklore and stuff like that, because you're kind of seeing the psychology of our ancestors and how they thought about things, what they, what their mindset was. Were they superstitious? Were they trying to be scientific? Like what? It was just, it's really fascinating and then to see how it changes as now the lore or the way it started isn't necessary anymore. We know that babies sometimes just die, and it's not a
It's
vampire,
not some kind of weird otherworldly creature. No, do you ever listen to old shows about like ancient civilizations? Be like, yeah, I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to, like, if a time machine were here, I'd be like, I don't know. They might think I'm a vampire or a witch and just like kill me immediately for no reason. This is one of those where it's like, so everybody was just getting sick and no one really did anything about it. They just like destroyed dead people's bodies and then they like felt better about it. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird to look back in time this far.
But to the modern day,
what if there have been time travelers and every single time they've either been killed like they're a witch or the government has figured it out and then like silenced them and killed them?
I like that. I like that as a premise too, where they keep trying, but it just doesn't work.
So
we've had time machines forever, but people in the past were too stupid.
I just learned about Stephen Hawking threw a party for time travelers, but he put out the invitation to it like worldwide, like a month after it happened. So he was like, "Oh, that didn't." Yeah, and he was
he
like,
tried to
time
set
travelers not real." Yeah.
Wow.
But do you know how excited he had to have been sitting there waiting for somebody to show up?
Yeah,
because somebody shows up. It could have been the pizza guy, and he'd be like, "Oh my God, it's happening."
There's that. And I also wanted to say, with what you were just saying about the time travelers, there's a great Dostoevsky short story where Jesus comes back and they execute him. It's
They're
really
like, you again, same thing.
It's very interesting.
No, that's that. But I think that there was a lot of like really, really heightened religiousness in Russia at that time. So it's a really interesting premise and probably a slightly dangerous one to execute Jesus in your short story during that era.
Right. Well, it's just it's fascinating, like you were saying, Kirk, to just like to think of what people thought were actual things and what was real, because it makes you look about everything.
I know we talked about it a little bit before we started recording, but I did want to mention it because and I'm not trying to go on this rabbit hole, but I just thought about it. And because I try to be introspective when I listen to stuff like this, that's all about stuff from a long time ago. Because we're making the same things, same mistakes, same stuff, just in a different way. Like if you can almost always see how we're doing the same thing, just in a different way. And I thought it was fascinating because I was thinking, okay, what are we doing that's similar to this? And the one that came to my brain is silly and funny was stupid people saying that 5G is what caused COVID. It's just one of those things. People they feel like they have to be able to blame something or somebody, so that they understand better than just a mutated disease. And so it's just, I don't know. It's fascinating. It's psychology, and it's just
the fear of the unknown is serious. It's better to know something, even if it's ridiculous, like because they probably felt a certain level of calm because they were very upset at AT&T.
But they're looking at their Wi-Fi network and they're like, disconnect, and they're like,
yeah, oh, I'm saved now. No, but there's something about the enemy the enemy you know is better than the one you don't. So there was just kind of, and I think it's just human, because really when you come down to it, that's where religions came from. That's where everything comes from.
But there's also this really fascinating thing that's hard to grapple with because it's like, the known enemy or whatever, but like these people don't know what 5G is. Like they don't know what it is.
I mean, somebody should have put the screws to them and be like, tell me what 5G is. Prove to me you know what it is, and we'll entertain this.
Well, and it's the same thing with vampires. It's like, they're like, oh, that's a vampire. And it's like, what the hell's a vampire? It's like, well, they're demon things.
They're things. I heard about them once. Don't even worry about it, but they're things.
It just makes me think that it's such a purposeful thing rather than an accidental thing to pick something that's not real,
Yeah.
Just so fascinating.
I learned so much. Like, I think I didn't know that there was almost like a a creation story that involved a vampire, basically.
So weird.
I did not know that at all.
Yeah, no, Lilith was Eve, right?
Yeah.
Like Lilith was like the first woman.
It was like the Eve before Eve.
Yeah.
It was, which they mentioned something in passing that now I really want to know about, which is the presidents before George Washington.
Yeah, and I think there was other number one guys in America when it was the colonies, is what they're referring to.
Yeah, so they were maybe they were considered, or the term was president, but it wasn't of the United States because it wasn't the United States yet.
Correct.
But it was funny because they're like they were presidents here before George Washington. So it was the same thing. That's what they were talking about. But I now I want to look into it because I didn't know that.
No,
I get it.
I'm right there with you. I wanted to, as soon as they said that, I wanted to look it up. I haven't yet, but I will.
Another bonus discovery in the podcast.
I think that's why I like this show so much, is because they're full of discovery. The whole thing, it's just nonstop.
There's a lot of discovering.
It was really good. I really enjoyed this one.
Well, all right, guys. So this was our last spooky episode.
Farewell,
so
spooky month.
Back to the regular, awesome podcast. Some of them might be spooky. We'll see. I don't know, but this one is not. This one is going to be much more of a historical podcast. It's so good, though. It's called Uncivil, and it is a deep dive into the Civil War from a lot of it's definitely from the perspective that you would not probably be taught at school. I know I didn't. I knew almost nothing about the Civil War, and that's the reason I was drawn to it, because I wanted to learn actual facts about, not this whitewashed garbage thing that we were taught,
Yep.
That it was like North and South. And anyway, I want to recommend 2 different episodes, and because they're like 20 minutes each. The one I want to recommend is called The Ring. So it's Uncivil, The Ring. And the second one is Uncivil, The Soldiers. And one of them is about a spy ring during the Civil War, which is really good.
Yeah.
And the other one is about modern day reenactors. And it's fascinating as well.
Yeah, I could go for, those both sound awesome.
I'm in for it. And hey, if they're spooky,
These are not spooky.
We're going to just keep it going. It's going to be only spooky shows from now on.
Let's just not have spooky shows, but let's act like they were spooky.
Okay, talk about the parts that scare us each time. Which part scared you the most?
The ads. The ad break.
The ads, yeah. I always panic and reach for my phone. But that's all for this episode. And remember,
there's always more to discover.
Goodbye.
This was a podcast from the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.